We're honored to be joined today by the United States Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, from the State Department. Secretary Pompeo, it's an honor to have you with us at the Jerusalem Post Khaleej Times Conference. Thank you so much for being here.
How come? It's great to be with you.
I want to ask you, the Abraham Accords, which you were obviously one of the main players and catalysts behind, is a stepping stone going forward when you think about the next administration. What advice would you tell them of how to keep this momentum going, especially when it comes to Iran and the threat that Iran continues to pose the region in the Middle East?
Well, one of the things that enabled the Abraham Accords was America's recognition that the most important players in this effort were the countries in the region, the Gulf states, Israel, all of those relevant players who are truly impacted by the Islamic Republic of Iran. So you asked, what would I tell the next administration? I certainly know what I think the right policies are with respect to Iran, and I hope they'll continue. But frankly, much of the action, much of the transformation that takes place was not just because of what the United States did. We helped, we were there as partner and friend, and what we did was important. But this has happened because it's the right thing to do. These sovereign nations made the decision to enter the Abraham Accords or begin to normalize relations, whether that's what the Moroccans have done or what the Saudis, what the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Sudanese have done. These countries did it because it was right for their own people. They did it because it was the right thing to do for the region. And these commercial relationships, these security relationships, these diplomatic relationships, I believe will continue to grow, and I hope the United States will continue to be an encouragement for that.
Do you see that Iran today is more isolated as a result of these accords, or are you concerned and maybe even foresee a possible conflict between Israel and Iran in the coming years?
Well, it's very clear that Iran is more isolated than it has ever been. That's a direct result of the policies that the Trump administration put in place. Our decision to abandon this ridiculous thing called the JCPOA, which enabled, armed, provided resources and money to the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about Iran and its deep connections to al-Qaeda as well. Look, these were a set of policies to put Iran in a place where it had to make hard decisions about its own economy and whether to feed and take care of its people, or continue to do the ridiculous things like arming Shia militias in Iraq, or their efforts in Syria, or Lebanese Hezbollah underwriting. We caused the Islamic Republic of Iran to have to make some really hard decisions by denying them resources. And then we said, look, we're going to go build out a security structure, whether it's the International Maritime Security Organization to patrol the Persian Gulf, or the efforts that we did to help the Abraham Accords come into effect, putting together the capacity for these countries to partner with Israel in important ways that preserved and created prosperity for those nations. All of those things are the right direction of travel for the entire region, not just those countries that have entered the Abraham Accords today, but every country in the region is safer, more prosperous, more secure as a result of these simple realities that this administration recognized, which I am very confident will continue.
But are you concerned about Iran looking towards the future and the possible policies that might change in that front?
Yes, of course. If we appease Iran, if we underwrite Iran, if we allow the Europeans to re-enter and create wealth for the Islamic Republic regime, the kleptocrats that are in charge of this theocracy, that'd be a bad thing for the region's security. It'd be a bad thing for Europe's security. It'd be a bad thing for American security. I hope the next administration will recognize that this isn't 2015 and will take on board the understandings that I think the whole world can recognize, which is that Iran is the destabilizing influence inside of the Middle East. They must be required to change the nature of the behavior in which they engage. And when they do, we can allow them to re-enter the community of normal nations. If they don't, the United States needs to make sure that we are part of a coalition that works alongside each other to promote security and stability in the Middle East.
I want to ask you, there were reports that were coming out in the last few weeks of the possibility that there would be another normalization with another country. Saudi Arabia was spoken about, other countries, and it seems that maybe what happened, the events last week in the U.S. Capitol, might have prevented that from moving forward. Do you think one has to do with the other?
No, I've seen no correlation between the two whatsoever. These normalizations, and I describe them as along a continuum. It's not binary. You're not either normalizing or not in the truest sense. We've seen lots of countries move in the right direction, even if they haven't formally signed the Abraham Accords themselves. This direction of travel, this increased understanding of Israel as the rightful homeland of the Jewish people, and a lawful entity, which is a great partner in which nations who are engaged in security relationships around the region should understand they should want on their side as a friend and an ally, not as someone who's an adversary that they pretend threatens them or their way of life. I think that direction of travel will continue. I think it's not just in the Middle East. I think you'll see this, as you saw with Sudan and Morocco. I think you'll see this happen in Africa. I think you'll see it happen in Islamic nations in Asia. This is a set of understandings which our administration has facilitated, which truly augur well for security throughout the region.
And you changed the U.S. standing, or at least the way it was defined in legal definition of Israeli settlement activity, or what settlements' legal status are in the West Bank. And we saw the announcement of new homes that are being built. Should we be concerned that this might spell trouble for Israel with some of the Abraham Accord partners?
So we've seen this issue of settlements there go on for a long time. What we knew was that we had to recognize reality. Let me give you a couple of examples, Jacob. So everyone knows the fact that we recognize Jerusalem as the rightful capital of the Jewish people.
Right.
It was just the reality, and we recognized it. Everyone understands that the Golan Heights are appropriately under the control of Israel. We simply recognize that. The same came with respect to settlements. They're not per se unlawful, and we simply acknowledged that existing fact. I don't think that threatens anyone's security or anyone's safety to acknowledge those simple understandings. Indeed, we were told if we did those things that all heck would break loose. That didn't materialize.
Right.
President Trump made the right call in each of those cases. We also acknowledge that we've got to try to work our best to find a solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. We want that. We laid out a deep roadmap, the deepest roadmap for Middle East peace that anyone's put out. The vision for peace in the Middle East offered a real, true pathway for a better existence for the Palestinian people. So far, the Palestinian leadership has chosen to reject that, to even consider it. I regret that. I hope that they will join the conversation so that they too can begin to develop a relationship with the state of Israel that is normal and secure and creates more prosperity for the Palestinian people as well. We desperately want that. The Palestinian people, I believe, desperately want that. Palestinian leadership must get on board.
Well, Secretary Pompeo, just before I let you go, thank you for joining us again at the Jerusalem Post Khaleej Times Conference. And thank you for the role you played in helping make this conference possible between an Israeli newspaper and an Emirati newspaper just a few months ago. I don't know that this would have been able to happen. So we have to thank you also for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for doing this. This is the kind of thing that I think we're going to see flower and prosper in the weeks and months and years ahead. It's a glorious thing for the world. Okay. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.